The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, crystal fragments catching the city lights streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. I stood frozen in my own penthouse, watching my fiancée Amelia laugh with Julian Vance like I didn't exist. "Leo, darling, clean that up," Amelia called without looking at me, her manicured hand resting on Julian's arm. "We're celebrating." I knelt among the glass shards, my architect's hand steady despite the humiliation burning in my chest. 3 years of engagement, 5 years together, and I'd become invisible furniture in the home I designed. "Julian just approved my promotion," Amelia announced, her voice carrying that manufactured sweetness she used in boardrooms. "I'm now Vice President of Strategic Development at Vance Properties." Julian's smirk made my skin crawl. "Amelia's earned it. We've been working very closely together." The way his eyes lingered on her made something dark twist in my stomach. I swept the glass into my palm, each shard a reminder of how small I'd become. "Congratulations," I managed, standing with bleeding fingertips. Amelia finally looked at me, her blue eyes cold as winter steel. "Oh, Leo's being dramatic again. It's just a little cut." Julian laughed, the sound echoing off the smart home speakers I'd installed throughout our penthouse. "Maybe you should stick to blueprints, not glassware." I excused myself to the kitchen, wrapping my hand in paper towels. Through the open doorway, I watched them move to the balcony, Amelia's body language shifting into something predatory and seductive. They thought the city noise would mask their whispers, but the acoustic design of this place carried every word. "Soon," I heard Julian say. "Once the Henderson project fails, we'll have everything we need." The Henderson project was my design, a billion-dollar mixed-use development I'd spent 2 years perfecting. It was supposed to be my breakthrough, my chance to prove I was more than Amelia's kept architect. "And Leo?" Amelia's voice drifted back, casual as discussing the weather. "He'll be ruined. Professionally, financially, socially, just like we planned." I gripped the counter until my knuckles went white. The woman I'd planned to marry was orchestrating my destruction with her boss, her lover, I now realized. Every late night, meeting, every business trip, every dismissive comment suddenly made perfect sense. They returned inside, Amelia's lipstick slightly smeared. "I should go," Julian said, straightening his tie. "Early morning tomorrow." After he left, I found Amelia in our bedroom, already changing into silk pajamas like nothing had happened. "You seem upset," she said, not bothering to face me. "Just tired." "Good, I need my sleep. Big day tomorrow." I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to her steady breathing. The woman beside me was a stranger, a beautiful, dangerous stranger who'd been playing a long game with my life as the stakes. By dawn, I'd made my decision. If Amelia and Julian wanted to destroy me, they'd learn what happened when you cornered a man with nothing left to lose. But first, I needed to survive what was coming. The next evening arrived with the precision of a stage production. Amelia had been distant all day, checking her phone constantly, her smiles tight and calculated. I recognized the signs now. She was preparing for something. "We need to talk," she announced over dinner, her voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. I set down my fork. "About what?" "About us. About how you've changed." The accusation hit like a slap. "How I've changed. You've become controlling, paranoid, following me, questioning my work schedule." Her eyes narrowed. "It's becoming frightening, Leo." Every word was a lie delivered with Oscar-worthy conviction. I'd never followed her, never questioned her late nights. If anything, I'd been too trusting, too blind. "Amelia, what are you talking about?" She stood abruptly, knocking over her wine glass. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth. "There! You're doing it again, that aggressive tone." "I'm not being aggressive. Don't raise your voice at me." She stepped backward, her hand trembling as she reached for her phone. "I can't take this anymore, Leo. You're scaring me." The performance was flawless. If I hadn't overheard her conversation with Julian, I might have believed it myself. But I could see the calculation behind her tears, the way she positioned herself near the door. "Amelia, please, let's just talk." "Stay away from me." She dialed 911 with shaking fingers. Hello? Police? I need help. My fiancé is threatening me. Please hurry. My world tilted sideways. Amelia, what are you doing? She spoke into the phone while watching me with cold satisfaction. He's been violent before. I'm afraid he's going to hurt me. Please. I'm at 2247 Harbor View, Penthouse A. This is insane, I said, but I kept my distance. Whatever game she was playing, I wouldn't give her ammunition. Within minutes, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. 3 officers burst through our door, hands on their weapons. Sir, step away from the woman, the lead officer commanded. I raised my hands, my architect's mind noting the irony. I designed this penthouse with reinforced doors for security, never imagining I'd be trapped inside it. Officers, there's been a misunderstanding. He grabbed me, Amelia sobbed, showing them a red mark on her wrist I knew she'd made herself. He said if I tried to leave him, he'd ruin me. The lead officer, a thick-set man with sergeant stripes, studied my face. Sir, I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Amelia leaned close to my ear. Her tears had stopped, her voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. Have fun in jail, loser. The words hit me like ice water. This wasn't passionate revenge or even calculated business. This was sport to her. I was nothing more than a toy she'd grown tired of breaking. They led me past the smart home control panel I'd programmed, past the custom lighting system I'd designed, past the life I'd built for a woman who'd been planning my destruction all along. In the elevator, I closed my eyes and began to plan. The holding cell smelled of disinfectant and desperation. 6 hours of fluorescent lights and concrete walls had given me plenty of time to think. The other inmates, a drunk college kid and a man who wouldn't stop muttering about government conspiracies, provided the perfect soundtrack to my planning. Parker, the desk sergeant called. You got a phone call. I followed him to a battered payphone, my mind racing through possibilities. Amelia wouldn't call. She was probably celebrating with Julian right now. My lawyer was out of state at his daughter's wedding. That left one option, one I'd avoided for years. I dialed the number I'd memorized but never used. Chief Vance speaking. My throat constricted. Even after 15 years, his voice carried the same authority that had terrified me as a teenager. Dad, it's Leo. Silence stretched between us, filled with old wounds and stubborn pride. Robert Vance, chief of police, pillar of the community, the father who'd disowned me when I chose architecture over law enforcement. Leo, his voice softened fractionally. What's wrong? I'm in custody, downtown station. They say I threatened someone. Another pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went silent. I stared at the receiver, wondering if I'd just made everything worse. My father had cut me out of his life when I refused to follow his path into police work. Now I was calling him from a jail cell, proving every prediction he'd made about my choices. 18 minutes later, I heard his voice in the hallway. It cut through the station's ambient noise like a blade. Where's my son? The desk sergeant's tone changed instantly. Chief, we weren't expecting... I asked you a question, Martinez. I was led to an interview room where my father waited. At 58, Robert Vance still commanded attention. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his uniform crisp, his dark eyes, my eyes, taking in every detail. Son, he said, standing as I entered. The officer started to follow me in, but my father's look stopped him cold. Give us the room. When we were alone, he studied my face like a crime scene. Tell me what happened. I laid out the entire story, Amelia's setup, the false accusations, the performance she'd orchestrated. My father listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. These are serious charges, Leo. I know, but Dad, I never touched her. This whole thing... I believe you. The simple statement hit me like a physical force. Your mother always said you got her gentle nature. Too gentle, maybe. Footsteps in the hallway interrupted us. The door opened, and the arresting sergeant entered, clearly uncomfortable. Chief, sorry to interrupt, but the complainant's here with her lawyer. She's demanding to know why the suspect hasn't been processed. My father's jaw tightened. The suspect is my son. The sergeant's face went pale. Sir, I had no idea. Would you mind explaining why my son is in handcuffs? The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I watched the sergeant's career flash before his eyes as he realized he'd arrested the chief's son without verification, without investigation, without due diligence. Sir, the complainant seemed credible and there were visible marks. Marks that could have been self-inflicted? My father's voice was low and razor-sharp. Did you photograph them? Take statements from neighbors? Check for security cameras? We were responding to an active domestic situation. No, Sergeant. You were responding to an allegation. There's a difference, and if you don't know it, you need remedial training. I watched my father transform into the legend cops whispered about, the chief who could make careers disappear with a phone call. Part of me was terrified. Another part was grateful. Sir, the sergeant stammered, what do you want us to do? My father looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the man who'd taught me to tie my shoes, who'd cheered at my Little League games, who'd been heartbroken when I chose a different path. Release him, he said, now. As the handcuffs came off, my father handed me his card. Call me tomorrow. We need to talk. Walking out of that station, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The power of family, the strength that came from not being alone. Amelia had made one critical error in her perfect plan. She'd forgotten that even broken relationships could be rebuilt when survival was at stake. And she had no idea what Robert Vance was capable of when someone threatened his family. My old workshop sat in the industrial district like a forgotten tomb. I hadn't been here since moving in with Amelia 2 years ago, but the key still fit, the light still worked, and the ghosts of my pre-Amelia life still haunted every corner. Blueprints covered the walls, designs I'd created before I started seeking her approval for everything. 3D models of buildings that existed only in my imagination crowded the workbenches. In the corner, my old computer hummed to life, its screens filling with the digital bones of architectural dreams. But tonight, I wasn't here to design buildings. I was here to design destruction. The charges against me had been dropped, Dad's influence extending into places I'd never imagined. But the damage was done. Word had spread through the tight-knit architectural community faster than wildfire. Leo Parker, the promising architect, had been arrested for domestic violence. The whispers would follow me everywhere. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, each one a small death. Heard about your troubles, Leo. Maybe we should postpone the Henderson project review. The firm thinks it's best if you take some time off while this settles. Sorry, man. The client specifically requested someone else. Amelia's plan was working perfectly. She'd destroyed my reputation without leaving fingerprints, positioning herself as the brave woman who'd escaped an abusive relationship. Julian would swoop in as her supportive boss, and together they'd steal my life's work. But she'd made one mistake. She'd forgotten that I'd designed our entire smart home system. I pulled up the penthouse schematics on my computer, every wire and circuit mapped in perfect detail. The home automation system I'd installed was military-grade. Motion sensors, security cameras, environmental controls, audio recording capabilities. I'd built it to protect us. Now it would be my weapon. Every smart device in that penthouse was connected to a central server. Every conversation was archived for security purposes. Every movement was tracked by motion detectors. And I still had administrative access to everything. My fingers flew across the keyboard, diving into digital directories I'd created years ago. The system had been recording continuously, storing weeks of data in encrypted files. If Amelia and Julian thought they could conspire in my own home without consequences, they were about to learn otherwise. The first file I opened made my body boil. Security camera footage from 3 weeks ago, Amelia and Julian in our living room, their bodies intertwined on the couch I'd bought for our engagement celebration. Her moans echoed through the speakers as Julian's hands roamed places that should have been mine alone. But it was the conversation afterward that made me smile for the first time in days. The Henderson project is perfect, Julian panted, still breathless from their affair. Leo's design is brilliant, but he'll never get credit for it. How can you be sure? Amelia asked, tracing patterns on his chest. Because he'll be destroyed before it's built. Professional sabotage is an art form, baby. First, we ruin his reputation, then we steal his work. By the time he realizes what happened, he'll be too broken to fight back. What about the recordings? The evidence? What evidence? You think anyone will believe a disgraced architect who beats his girlfriend? Their laughter cut through my soul like shattered glass. I opened more files, each one revealing new layers of their conspiracy. Phone records showing months of secret communication. Financial documents proving Julian had been feeding Amelia inside information about competing bids. Audio recordings of them planning my downfall like a military campaign. But the final file was the masterpiece. A recording from just hours before my arrest. Amelia practicing her performance in our bedroom mirror. "Please help me, officer," she rehearsed, perfecting her trembling voice. "He's been so violent lately. I'm afraid he'll hurt me." She practiced the fake tears, the frightened gestures, the way she'd show them the bruise she'd given herself with makeup and careful pressure. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and it was all captured in high-definition video. I leaned back in my chair, studying the evidence spread across my screens. Amelia and Julian had spent months building their trap, but they'd sprung it inside a surveillance system designed by their target. They'd made their move. Now it was time for mine. The Henderson Project Gala was next week, the city's biggest social event, where architectural achievements were celebrated and careers were made. Julian and Amelia would be there, accepting credit for my work, cementing their victory. They expected me to be broken, hiding in shame while they claimed their prize. Instead, I'd be orchestrating the most spectacular demolition of my career, not of a building, but of two lives that had tried to bury mine. Julian Vance lived in a smart mansion that made my penthouse look like a starter home. Glass walls, automated everything, and enough surveillance equipment to run a small military operation. He'd built it as a monument to his success, never realizing he'd also built his own prison. I sat in my car across the street, studying the architectural plans I'd pulled from city records. Every smart home had vulnerabilities, wireless signals that could be intercepted, systems that could be hacked, privacy that could be shattered with the right tools. Julian's mansion wasn't just connected, it was infected with technology, every device talking to every other device in a digital conversation I could join uninvited. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Coffee tomorrow? We should talk." I'd been avoiding his calls since my release, not ready to face whatever lecture was coming. But sitting here, planning something that would either save my life or destroy it completely, I realized I needed all the allies I could get. I typed back, 8 a.m. Harbor Diner. Then I focused on the house across the street. The first hack was simple. Julian's home Wi-Fi network used a password any teenager could crack. Within minutes, I was inside his digital kingdom, mapping every connected device like an architect surveying a building site. Smart thermostat, compromised. Security cameras, accessed. Audio system, infiltrated. Automated lighting, under my control. I started small. The thermostat clicked up 2 degrees every hour, just enough to make him uncomfortable. The smart speakers would play white noise at random intervals, barely audible but persistent enough to create anxiety. His automated coffee maker would start brewing at 3 a.m., filling his kitchen with the smell of coffee he hadn't ordered. By the third night, Julian was calling his security company. I listened through his kitchen speakers as he argued with the technician. "I'm telling you something's wrong with the system. Things are happening on their own." "Mr. Vance, our diagnostics show everything's normal. Maybe you're just stressed." "Stressed? I'm not stressed. I'm being harassed by my own house." The technician's voice carried the patient tone reserved for difficult clients. "Would you like us to schedule a full system reset?" "Yes, do it, all of it." I smiled in the darkness across the street. Resetting the system would take hours, cost thousands, and accomplish nothing. I'd be back inside within minutes of them leaving. But Julian's paranoia was just the appetizer. That night I escalated. At 2 a.m., I triggered his security system, sending alerts to his phone about intruders in the backyard. The cameras showed nothing but shadows moving in the wind, but Julian spent 20 minutes searching his property with a baseball bat. At 3:15 a.m., I turned his shower to ice-cold water while he was inside it. At 4:30 a.m., his garage door started opening and closing repeatedly, the mechanical grinding echoing through his bedroom wall. By morning, Julian looked like he hadn't slept in days. I watched him through his own security cameras as he stumbled around his kitchen, jumping at every sound, checking locks that were already locked. His paranoia was becoming visible, and that's when I knew Amelia would start to doubt him. I'd studied her for 5 years. She was attracted to power, control, success. A man afraid of his own house was none of those things. My phone rang, startling me out of my surveillance. Dad's name appeared on the screen. "Leo, we need to meet, now." "What's wrong?" "Just meet me at the station." Back entrance. "And son?" His voice carried a weight that made my chest tight. "Bring everything you've got on Amelia and Julian." I stared at the mansion across the street, at Julian pacing behind his floor-to-ceiling windows like a caged animal. Whatever Dad had discovered, it was big enough to change everything. Time to find out if my father was an ally or another enemy I'd have to face. My father waited in his office with 2 cups of coffee and a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. At 58, Robert Vance still looked like he could break suspects with his bare hands, but his eyes held something I hadn't seen since childhood: worry. "Sit down, son." I took the coffee, grateful for something to do with my shaking hands. "What did you find?" "Julian Vance isn't just some developer," Dad said, opening the folder. "He's connected to people who make problems disappear, permanently." "What kind of people?" "The kind who don't leave witnesses." Dad spread photographs across his desk. Surveillance shots of Julian meeting with men in expensive suits, documents showing money transfers to offshore accounts. "We've been watching him for months as part of a federal investigation into construction contract corruption." I stared at the photos, my mind racing. "Does he know you're investigating him?" "Not yet, but if he finds out you're my son..." Dad's voice trailed off, but the implications hung in the air like smoke. "He'll hurt me." "He might try." My father's hand moved to his service weapon, an unconscious gesture that told me everything about how seriously he was taking this threat. "Leo, what you did to his house, we know about it." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "How?" "Because we've been monitoring his communications, his calls to security companies, his complaints about system malfunctions. They all get flagged in our investigation. We put it together pretty quickly." I waited for the lecture, the arrest, the moment my father chose duty over family. Instead, he smiled. "It was brilliant, son. Subtle, effective, completely untraceable. You've got him so paranoid he's making mistakes." "Mistakes?" Dad pulled out a transcript. "Yesterday, Julian called Amelia and accused her of sabotaging his house to drive him crazy. She hung up on him. 3 hours later, she called someone else, someone we've been very interested in." He handed me another document. Phone records showing calls between Amelia and a number registered to Vincent Torres, a name that appeared in FBI files as a person of interest in multiple disappearances. "She's planning something, Leo. Something that involves you not being around to cause problems." The room spun around me. Amelia wasn't just stealing my career, she was making sure I wouldn't be around to stop her. "What do we do?" "We?" Dad leaned forward, his voice dropping to the tone he'd used when teaching me to handle bullies as a kid. "We're going to use your architectural skills and my police resources to build a trap they'll never see coming." He pulled out building schematics, not of Julian's house, but of the convention center where the Henderson project Gala would be held next week. "This is where they'll make their move," he said, pointing to the main ballroom. "Julian and Amelia will accept credit for your design, announce their engagement, and paint you as a dangerous ex who might show up to cause trouble. When you turn up lifeless afterward, everyone will assume it was a tragic case of domestic violence that escalated. But we know better. We know better, and now we're going to prove it." Dad's finger traced the building's layout. The convention center's security system is outdated, easily compromised. But what they don't know is that we've been upgrading it as part of an anti-terrorism initiative. New cameras? New everything. Audio, video, real-time facial recognition, electronic monitoring of every phone in the building. When they make their move, we'll capture everything. I studied the schematics, my architect's brain automatically noting the sight lines, the acoustic properties, the ways sound and light moved through the space. We need more than just evidence of their conspiracy. We need to destroy them so completely they'll never recover. Dad's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. What did you have in mind? I looked at my father, really looked at him, for the first time in 15 years. The man who'd taught me that justice was worth fighting for, that protecting family was sacred, that sometimes the right thing was also the hard thing. We're going to give them exactly what they want, I said. A public stage, a captive audience, and all the rope they need to hang themselves. And if they try to hurt you in the process? I thought about Amelia's whispered cruelty, Julian's arrogant laughter, the months of manipulation and betrayal. Then they'll learn what happens when you corner a man who's got nothing left to lose and a police chief for a father. Dad reached across the desk and shook my hand. Welcome back, son. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I might actually survive this. The Henderson project Gala was 3 days away, and every detail had to be perfect. Not just the lighting, the sound system, or the catering, but the choreography of justice I was orchestrating with my father's help. In my workshop, I assembled the final pieces of evidence like an architect crafting blueprints. Video files, audio recordings, financial documents, and photographs spread across multiple monitors in a digital mosaic of betrayal. Everything was synchronized, cataloged, and ready for broadcast. The AV system at the convention center is completely under our control, Dad reported during our morning briefing. New cameras, upgraded sound, and direct feeds to every news outlet in the city. When you're ready to show the evidence, it'll go everywhere simultaneously. I nodded, studying the Gala's program. Julian and Amelia would take the stage at 9 p.m. to accept the Architectural Innovation Award, my award, for my design, in front of the city's entire social and business elite. What about security? Plainclothes officers throughout the crowd, SWAT on standby, and Torres under surveillance. The moment he moves toward you, we take him down. Torres, Amelia's contact, the man who made problems disappear. Dad's investigation had revealed his pattern. Wait for a public event where the target would be visible, then arrange an accident in the parking garage or a mugging gone wrong in the alley behind the venue. He won't get the chance, I said, pulling up the convention center's layout on my screen, because I won't be in the audience. Dad frowned. Leo, if you're not there, I'll be here. I pointed to a small room behind the main stage, the AV control booth, normally staffed by technicians. Hidden, protected, and with complete control over every screen and speaker in the building. That's not the plan we discussed. The plan we discussed ends with Torres in handcuffs and Julian and Amelia facing conspiracy charges. That's justice. I turned to face my father. But I don't want justice anymore, Dad. I want them destroyed so completely they'll never recover. Something dark flickered in my father's eyes. What are you thinking? I pulled up the evidence files on my main screen. Months of surveillance footage showing Julian and Amelia's affair, their conspiracy to steal my work, their plan to destroy my reputation. But hidden in the folders was something else. Financial records showing Julian's connections to the city council members who'd approved his development contracts, payoff schedules that implicated half the city's political establishment, and audio recordings that would bring down everyone who'd helped them. They didn't just try to destroy me, I said quietly. They've been destroying this city for years, bribing officials, cutting corners on safety inspections, stealing public land for private development. The Henderson project was just the latest. Dad studied the files, his expression growing darker with each page. This goes deeper than we thought. It goes all the way to the top. And tomorrow night, everyone in that ballroom will see exactly how deep the corruption runs. I opened the final folder, the one I'd been saving for last. Security footage from Julian's mansion recorded just days ago. Julian and Vincent Torres meeting in the kitchen. Their conversation captured by the very surveillance system Julian had paid thousands to have secured. "He's becoming a liability," Torres said on the recording. "Paranoid, unpredictable. After we handle the architect, maybe it's time Julian had an accident too." Amelia's voice came from off-camera. "How much?" "For both? $500,000, clean, untraceable. Done." The recording ended with handshakes and the kind of casual discussion of making someone disappear that turned my stomach. Dad was quiet for a long moment. She was planning to hurt Julian too. After he helped her destroy me, she's been playing a longer game than either of us realized. I closed the laptop and looked at my father. Tomorrow night, the city's entire power structure will be in that ballroom. Political leaders, business executives, media moguls, everyone who matters. "And you want to burn it all down?" I thought about the 5 years I'd spent building a life with Amelia, the dreams I'd shared with her, the future we'd planned together. All of it built on lies, manipulation, and betrayal. She hadn't just broken my heart, she'd shattered my faith in everything I'd believed about love, trust, and human decency. They took everything from me, Dad. My career, my reputation, my home, my future. They would have taken my life. I stood up, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. Tomorrow night, I'm taking everything from them. And after? When the smoke clears and the arrests are made? I looked around my workshop, at the blueprints of buildings I'd never build, the dreams I'd never realize, the life I'd never get back. Amelia and Julian had herded Leo Parker, the architect, the dreamer, the man who'd believed in happy endings. What was left was something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. "After tomorrow night, Leo Parker disappears," I said, "and maybe that's for the best." Dad reached across the table and gripped my shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone, son." For a moment, I let myself feel the warmth of family, the strength that came from not being abandoned. Then I pulled away, returning to my screens, my plans, my preparation for the controlled demolition of 2 lives. Yes, I do. This is my design, my blueprint, my building to bring down. Tomorrow night, the entire city would watch as I proved that the quiet architect they'd dismissed was capable of engineering the most spectacular destruction any of them had ever seen. The Grandview Convention Center sparkled like a jewel against the night sky, its Art Deco facade glowing with spotlights that turned the building into a beacon visible from miles away. Inside, 500 of the city's most powerful people moved through the main ballroom like sharks in expensive suits, their laughter and conversation creating a symphony of ambition and corruption. From my position in the AV control booth, I had a perfect view of the main stage where Julian and Amelia would soon accept credit for my life's work. Banks of monitors showed every angle of the ballroom, every conversation, every face. The upgraded surveillance system Dad had installed captured everything in crystal clear detail. "Final sound check complete," I whispered into my earpiece. "All systems green." Dad's voice crackled back. "Torres is in position by the north exit. 3 associates with him, SWAT teams ready on my signal." I adjusted the controls, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Months of planning, weeks of preparation, years of betrayal, it all came down to the next 2 hours. On the main monitor, I watched Amelia glide through the crowd like a predator in designer clothing. Her black evening gown hugged every curve, her smile was radiant, and her performance as the grieving victim of domestic violence was flawless. Several prominent women had already embraced her, offering support for her brave escape from an abusive relationship. Julian worked the room with the confidence of a man who owned everything he touched. City councilmen sought his approval, business leaders courted his attention, and journalists hung on his every word. He'd positioned himself as the visionary behind the Henderson project, the developer who would reshape the city's skyline. Neither of them knew that their victim was watching from above, orchestrating their destruction with the precision of a master architect. At 8:45 p.m., the lights dimmed, and Mayor Patricia Cole took the stage. Her voice filled the ballroom through speakers I controlled, cameras I commanded capturing every gesture. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the annual Henderson Project Gala. Tonight, we celebrate innovation, vision, and the future of our great city. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. I watched Julian adjust his tie, Amelia touch up her lipstick. They were preparing for their moment of triumph, unaware that I was preparing for their moment of ruin. This year's Architectural Innovation Award goes to a project that will define our skyline for generations to come, Mayor Cole continued. The Henderson mixed-use development represents the finest in modern design and urban planning. More applause. Julian stood, straightening his jacket with the confidence of a man who'd never lost at anything that mattered. Please join me in recognizing the visionary team behind this incredible achievement. Julian Vance of Vance Properties and Amelia Parker, VP of Strategic Development. The crowd rose to their feet as Julian and Amelia walked toward the stage. I noticed she'd kept my last name, a final twist of the knife, claiming my identity along with my work. They climbed the steps to thunderous applause, their faces glowing in the stage lights. Julian accepted the Crystal Award while Amelia stood beside him, playing the supportive partner with Academy Award skill. "Thank you," Julian said, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. "This project represents everything Vance Properties stands for: innovation, integrity, and community partnership." I almost laughed at the irony. Innovation stolen from me, integrity abandoned years ago, and community partnership bought with bribes and corruption. "We couldn't have achieved this without the support of our city leaders," Julian continued, gesturing toward the crowd. "And I want to especially thank my partner, both in business and in life." He turned to Amelia with a smile that made my stomach churn. "Amelia, will you marry me?" The proposal was theater, staged for maximum impact. Julian dropped to one knee, producing a ring that caught the spotlights like captured fire. Amelia gasped with practiced surprise, tears streaming down her face as she nodded, yes. The crowd exploded in applause, champagne glasses raised in celebration of the perfect power couple. Julian slipped the ring onto Amelia's finger while cameras flashed like lightning, capturing what everyone believed was a moment of pure romance. I watched it all through my monitors, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. They'd just given me the perfect moment to destroy them both. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian said, his arm around Amelia's waist, "before we celebrate, I'd like to share something special with you. A behind-the-scenes look at how the Henderson project came to life." He nodded toward the back of the room, and I knew this was my cue. The moment they expected technical difficulties, system glitches, or maybe some romantic montage of their fake love story. Instead, they were about to get the truth. I pressed the first sequence of buttons, and every screen in the ballroom came alive with crystal-clear video. Not wedding photos or architectural renderings, but security footage from our penthouse 3 weeks ago. The crowd's applause died as they watched Julian and Amelia locked in passionate embrace on my living room couch. Her moans echoed through the sound system, Julian's hands roaming her body, while wedding invitations sat unopened on the table beside them. "What the hell?" Julian started, but his voice was drowned out by gasps from the audience. I switched to audio only, letting their conspiracy play out in surround sound. "The Henderson project is perfect," Julian's voice filled the ballroom. "Leo's design is brilliant, but he'll never get credit for it." "How can you be sure?" Amelia's breathlessness made several elderly donors clutch their pearls. "Because he'll be destroyed before it's built. Professional sabotage is an art form, baby." The ballroom had gone silent except for their recorded voices. 500 of the city's elite stood frozen, watching the golden couple's private moment become horrifyingly public. "This is insane!" Julian shouted, grabbing for the microphone. "Someone's hacking the system!" But I was just getting started. The screens shifted to financial documents, bank transfers, bribery schedules, payoff records. Names and amounts scrolled past like movie credits, each entry representing another politician bought, another contract stolen, another corner cut in the name of profit. Mayor Cole's name appeared linked to a $200,000 payment. City Councilman Rodriguez showed $150,000 in consulting fees. Even the building inspector who'd approved Julian's projects had received monthly payments for 2 years. "Turn it off!" someone screamed from the crowd. But the screens kept rolling, showing phone records, meeting transcripts, and surveillance footage of handshakes that had sold the city's soul piece by piece. Then came the final act. The audio shifted to the recording I'd captured just days ago. Julian and Vincent Torres in the mansion kitchen, discussing how to make me disappear as casually as ordering pizza. "He's becoming a liability," Torres's voice filled the ballroom. "Paranoid, unpredictable. After we handle the architect, maybe it's time Julian had an accident too." Amelia's voice joined the conversation from off-camera. "How much?" "For both? $500,000, clean, untraceable." Done. The handshake that sealed my death warrant played on every screen, captured in high-definition clarity that left no room for doubt or denial. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Reporters rushed toward the stage, politicians fled toward the exits, and donors demanded answers that neither Julian nor Amelia could provide. "This is all fake," Julian screamed into the microphone. "Deepfakes, digital manipulation." But his protests were drowned out by the final piece of evidence, Amelia's practice session in our bedroom mirror, rehearsing the performance that had landed me in jail. "Please help me, officer," her recorded voice pleaded with theatrical desperation. "He's been so violent lately. I'm afraid he'll hurt me." On screen, she practiced her fake tears, adjusted her makeup to create the bruise she'd show police, perfected the trembling voice that had almost destroyed my life. The real Amelia stood frozen on stage, her face drained of all color as she watched her own duplicity broadcast to the city's entire power structure. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, activating the microphone in my control booth. My voice echoed through the ballroom with mechanical precision. "You've just witnessed 5 years of systematic corruption, theft, and a conspiracy to erase anyone who stood in their way." Security guards rushed toward the booth, but I'd locked the doors from the inside. They'd need cutting equipment to reach me, and I'd be long gone by then. "The Henderson project was designed by Leo Parker," I continued, watching the chaos through my monitors. "The man Julian Vance and Amelia Parker tried to frame, destroy, and ultimately erase to cover their crimes." Julian grabbed the microphone, his composure finally cracking. "Leo Parker is a dangerous, obsessed stalker who is standing right behind you," said a familiar voice. Julian spun around to find my father on stage, his police uniform crisp, his badge glinting in the spotlights, his service weapon clearly visible on his hip. "Chief Robert Vance, CCPD," Dad announced to the crowd. "And Leo Parker is my son." The ballroom fell silent except for the clicking of camera shutters and the scratch of pens on reporter notepads. "Julian Vance and Amelia Parker, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, bribery, and plotting to eliminate a rival." Dad's voice carried the authority of 30 years in law enforcement. "You have the right to remain silent." But Julian wasn't silent. He was screaming. "This is a setup, a family conspiracy. You can't trust anything they say." "Actually," Dad replied, handcuffing Julian with practiced efficiency, "we can trust the federal agents who've been building a case against you for the past 8 months. The evidence you just saw represents only a fraction of what we've collected." FBI agents materialized from the crowd, their badges gleaming as they moved to secure the scene. The investigation Dad had mentioned was real, bigger than I'd imagined, and my personal vendetta had just provided the final pieces of evidence they'd needed. Amelia stood motionless as a female agent approached with handcuffs. Her perfect composure had finally cracked, revealing something small and desperate underneath all that manufactured beauty. "Leo!" she called out, searching the stage frantically. "Leo, please! I loved you. This was all Julian's idea. But I wasn't on stage. I was in my control booth, watching her final performance through digital eyes that captured every lie, every manipulation, every desperate attempt to save herself by destroying someone else. "The suspect is requesting to speak with Leo Parker," the female agent said into her radio. Dad looked directly at one of my cameras, knowing I was watching. "Tell Mr. Parker that some conversations aren't worth having." He was right. There was nothing Amelia could say that would change what she'd done, no apology that could repair what she'd broken, no explanation that could justify the months of cruelty and betrayal. As they led her away in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. The ballroom was emptying now, guests fleeing like roaches when the lights came on. Some would be arrested before they reached their cars. The financial records I'd revealed would keep federal prosecutors busy for years. Others would simply disappear, their political careers ending with the closing credits of my revenge. I gathered my equipment, wiped the hard drives clean, and prepared to leave through the service exit I'd scouted weeks ago. The investigation would continue without me. The trials would proceed without my testimony, and justice would be served without my presence. Leo Parker, the architect, was gone, undone by the very woman who once swore she loved him. What walked out of that control booth was something else entirely, something harder, colder, and completely free of the illusions that had once made me vulnerable. I paused at the exit door, looking back at the chaos I'd orchestrated. Julian and Amelia were gone, loaded into separate federal vehicles bound for holding cells that would be their home for the next several years. The city's corrupt elite scattered like leaves in a hurricane, their carefully constructed lives crumbling as efficiently as any controlled demolition. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Proud of you, son. Call me when you're ready." I turned off the phone and walked into the night, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 lives and the blueprint for the most successful demolition I'd ever designed. Behind me, sirens wailed and cameras flashed, documenting the fall of Julian Vance and Amelia Parker. Ahead lay the open road, new cities, fresh starts, and the freedom that came from having nothing left to lose and no one left to trust. The architect's demolition was complete.